Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. The Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek delivers a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on stories, trends that lead to better solutions, and kind of evaluating where the industry is going and some insights to help both our customers, other integrators, and just everyone in general with their daily processes and daily engineering developments. Our guests commonly share tips and outcomes that will improve your productivity, as well as other avenues that you maybe didn't necessarily think about in the initial. I'm your host, Matthew Susi, a technical consultant with Grantek and our digital solutions consulting group. Today, I'm joined by Chase Dorsey of Inductive Automation. Chase is a sales engineer in Inductive Automation. Since 2020, Chase has been helping manufacturers improve their operations with Ignition by Inductive Automation. Ignition has been known for bringing digital transformation affordably to the industrial operations. Typically, just using one server license, manufacturers can connect all their devices and collect data. Chase, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Do you want to give me a little bit of your background, kind of how you got into manufacturing and kind of where things have been growing for you?
Yeah, like you said, I started kind of in the 2020 timeline. I was in college. I was going to a career fair, managed to bump into a company that was actually out of my hometown instead of one of the nearby big cities. So I went back home for the summer break and I did some integration work. And the first thing they put me to was, using Ignition, manipulating tags, connecting to devices. And that's kind of just how I got my start.
Amazing. And I feel like when you first kind of step into the automation world, or especially in manufacturing, it is a little bit of a whirlwind, right? You're seeing all these different processes. You're trying to get your head around what you're connecting to. Ignition is kind of a great way, for example, to get a lot of that connectivity and do it quickly and easily, right? We see all these different processes with all these different data points and different pieces of equipment, legacy, new, so many different ways, but Ignition kind of makes it universal to reach out and pull those things in and offer control. And that's kind of where Industry 4.0 is going in a sense, or has been going in a sense, right? So, kind of on that note, what does Industry 4.0 mean to you?
For me, it's really about like kind of connecting everything all the way from the bottom to the top. I like to think of it as a vertical stack, OT at the bottom, IT at the top, getting the data where it needs to go and in front of the people that really can use that data. And of course, operators can use that data for their day-to-day activities. Maintenance can use that data. And then, of course, up in the enterprise level, you can have people doing, reports and all sorts of data analytics to be able to make more performant decisions down the line as well. So that's kind of what 4.0 is to me.
That's great. And I think what people always get lost with, or in my experience, I've gotten lost with it 4.0, is they get obsessive over the analytics and obsessive over, what was happening on the floor, what was the historical piece of it. They kind of forget that, just as you said, the plant floor operations, the supervisors, the maintenance staff, the engineers that are dealing with the day-to-day fires, it is a critical asset, right? It is the way that they can tweak the process during things are going on. It gives them some insight and visibility to what's happening in the process. And it gives them that firefighting tool that they can kind of go back and say, okay, see where things are starting to go wrong. Let's catch it now. Let's notify the teams that need to be involved in this, right? So it really is the full stack of the enterprise, right? Is there any surprise cases where you've seen this data kind of used and manipulated in a way you didn't necessarily expect?
Mhm. I think really the biggest surprise is always just what operators are able to do with the data. A lot of people just see them as running the machines, doing the day-to-day activities, but they also have all the contextual information around what's happening at the moment. I did a lot of work in water plants, and so I've seen a lot of crazy stuff done where an operator just happened to have all the data because they were looking at their screen, they had it all pulled in, and then they were able to make some executive decisions in the moment that, either prevented some downtime or managed to make sure that nothing bad happened or alerted maintenance to something that they saw ahead of time without needing to have an actual like maintenance event or things like that. So that's really where it was the most surprising to me because I expected a lot of that to come through the software itself, but the operators are very competent at what they do.
So it's an interesting point, right? We take for granted the human intervention, the human supervising of a process, right? We focus a lot today on the automated pieces and making sure the system is reporting to us and notifying us, even in the early hours of operation, right? but we sometimes take for granted that core operator, what we're enabling them with, or empowering them with, I think is a proper word to use for it, that they can do so much more, right? I like to think of Industry 4.0 and a lot of what we're doing, especially with Ignition, for example, as empowering day-to-day operations, making people's jobs better. So it's nice to hear. It's nice to have experiences and stories like that, where in wastewater, for example, where you're putting that data in front of operators, they're able to make better decisions, make more active decisions in the process, right? It just makes the process better for all of us, I feel.
Yeah, you could really only program around so many eventualities. The engineers get a spec, they can try to avoid what they can, but the guys who are running it every day know better. And so if the engineers can listen to that, then they can program the system better, but they can't catch everything. And so really empowering, I think, is the correct word to use there, where letting them make their decisions and have the information they need. And of course, that doesn't just apply to operators, that applies to managers and executives. The more data they have in front of them, the more context they have for that data, the better decisions they can make for the company or the efficiency and things like that.
And I think that's the beauty of the Industry 4.0, right? Like, it's not just we're affecting one role, one job. We kind of affect all of them, right? It's interesting in how it's transformative for all these different roles, all these different industries, these different verticals. And I think almost a little bit more pointed to inductive automation. You guys are the transformative technology in the industry, right? You're really making things easier to connect to. You're helping manufacturers actually implement it, bringing them forward from that, say, Industry 3.0 to the 4.0. Kind of bridging your sales and application engineering. What do you think the biggest gap right now is for manufacturers that see Industry 4.0 will do for them versus what the actual, say, return on investment is at this time?
Yeah, a lot of that is really going to come down to kind of what the operators want again versus what the executives want. Like, if you can empower the operators to manage the system efficiently and making sure that you have the least amount of maintenance events possible, the highest efficiency, like you said, you're part of the MES, so you know all about OEE and everything like that. Trying to keep
Right.
those numbers up at the plant floor really impacts the way that executive sees getting the return on investment on whatever software you're using in that case. And of course, you can't forget the human aspect of that. And so I think really, again, like I said earlier, starting from the bottom and moving the way all the way up, that's going to be where you start to see the most return on investment.
Do you find when you start from the bottom, you get that operator buy-in? Is it just that? Is it because the operators are seeing the value, they're using it more, and then coming full circle, the executives are seeing the value because the system's adopting, they're seeing efficiencies. It's kind of building from that foundation upward.
Yeah, and the main piece that I really think can help operators is not just empowering them, but also making their lives easier. Because if they enjoy
Yep.
what they do, and if they, if their job is simple and easy, and they can understand it and make decisions, then things will be more efficient rather than an operator who doesn't enjoy working, or they have to make, a million clicks to go get to somewhere that they need to see data. That's just going to impact their efficiency, which is going to impact the efficiency of everything else. And it's just a cascade from there.
You bring up a really great point of that, of it resonates. A million clicks, right? I need a million clicks just to go and see one graph, or I need a million clicks to go and see two different windows, right? If you're making things easily accessible, people are going to want to use it. They're going to see it beneficial to their everyday, right? It's not a groan that they have to go and use these systems, these tools. It's a thankfully I get to use this system. I get to use something that's going to make my day to day better. And I think, selfishly, it makes our job a lot of fun, right? We see
Yeah.
immediate feedback. We get that dopamine hit of I'm having an improvement. I'm making someone's lives better in the day to day, right? We all have to work. If we can make it enjoyable for one another, I think that's a great thing. It's fun to be in a space where we have that opportunity. I think it's
Yeah,
interesting to see how this is going.
that
Go
was
ahead.
definitely one of my favorite parts when I was designing screens, getting to do some live tweaks for operators to move a button or do something small like that. It feels kind of inconsequential, but the operators hitting that button 50, 100 times a day, and just one less click in the process means that you're saving hundreds of, seconds across many operators across days or years. And personally, of course, I love the enjoyment of feeling good about improving my screens. That's a lot of what I did when I was a system integrator, was mostly screen design. And so also getting to see them, almost relieved that they don't have to deal with this, little thorn in their side anymore. I know Inductive loves to use the pain points. If we can remove pain points from operators, that makes their lives easier. That makes them enjoy their job more, and it all cascades from there.
And I think it's just one of the most rewarding experiences in the industry, right? Safety is another one. You're keeping people safe, but when you make that day to day, you make it not feel monotonous. You make it feel engaging for someone. It really is what kind of keeps you coming back to this, right? Keeps you coming back to that next project, that next kind of opportunity to innovate. Kind of on the note of innovation, data standardization, interoperability between multi vendors is continuing to be a thing in the industry, right? There's so many different OEMs, machines, protocols, everything else. You guys at Inductive Automation have navigated this fairly well. How are you continuing to handle this as Industry 4.0 continues to balloon and you start to scale the architecture from plant floor to, say, cloud and AI?
Yeah, just more and more open standards, honestly. That's one thing that, kind of pulled me into Ignition when I was first working in the space. Was why would I want to work with something that almost feels like it doesn't want to work with me? I want to work with other devices, other technologies, things like that, that are open and willing to share their data, because I'm not in it for me, I'm in it for the end user. And so making their lives easier, having open standards makes my life easier, which makes their life easier. And then you have that full industry 4.0. I don't think if we didn't have the open standards like OPC-UA and MQTT, I don't know if we would be where we are at Industry 4.0 at this point, because it would still be data silos between different vendors or different technologies or different pieces of hardware. So I really just think pushing that envelope and trying to get as much as we can on standards is really going to be what helps the industry in general.
I think I agree with you completely, right? Like if we have more open standards, we have more open to communication, we can start to get away from all these silos. We can start to unify things, right? We can start to share information. Even last year through this year and years before this too, talk about the unified namespace. We're trying to get all these systems communicating on one equal plane. So everyone has the most up-to-date information at the same time accurately. We're not getting systems where there is past information or previous records or inconsistent information, right? And I think a lot of what you're saying, driving or communicating through open standards and sharing open standards, is getting us over those humps, right? It's getting us over those siloed situations and getting us to a properly connected, properly up to date kind of infrastructure. This kind of tends to be a challenge, though, when you get to older manufacturers or long legacy manufacturers, where in the industry, if it's not broke, we're not going to fix it, right? So there's a lot of legacy equipment still out there. How are you guys kind of handling that and running into situations where you see manufacturers that are stuck in that legacy hole and they want to climb out, but it's a bit of a climb, just that.
Yeah, I feel like a squeaky wheel here, but really starting to make the operator's life easier. Personally, when I was in industry, I did a little bit of fiber spinning for a while, and they were still using whiteboards on the plant floor, just giant rolling whiteboards that here's the one that here's the bobbin that had an issue, here's a defect here, and the first thing we did was try to get all of that into reports so that the operators could easily enter a few pieces of information on a computer screen, click submit, then you could have that report anywhere instead of having to literally roll a whiteboard from one side of the plant to the other, from where they were actually doing the manufacturing to where they were doing their quality control, so that they could test the mistakes that they had and things like that. So making it easier for them and only doing it one piece at a time, um, really starting with something like a whiteboard and not trying to revolutionize their whole system all at once, because big change like that can be scary. Big change like that costs a lot of money. And so if you do small pieces and kind of over time iterate through that, you make the operators comfortable with the new small piece, You introduce another one, you make them comfortable with that, you introduce another one, and then at some point you can start getting larger and larger pieces because they kind of understand the way that the system works. And then that's probably the smoothest transition that you can go between kind of the legacy equipment and a system like this. And then, of course, just using things that can kind of bridge that gap in the meantime, if it's, so legacy that they just can't replace the physical equipment or something like that. When it comes to PLCs, of course, whiteboards are easy to get rid of. PLCs are a lot harder to swap out.
It's you touch on several good points there, right? Where legacy equipment can be everything from the digital that we're used to, the connectivity of, say, sensors and PLCs and old communication protocols, but right down to paper and whiteboards, and we still see it prominently, right? Or that Excel spreadsheet that's running on someone's dedicated laptop or tablet, or that MS Access database that's somehow still on the company network, right? And you also bring up a really key point. I hit on this a lot of change doesn't always happen overnight. It's like forming a habit. It's slow. Well, it can be quick and iterative, but it's small steps, right? Taking small steps and you're slowly bringing the culture forward. You're getting people used to things. You're getting people to buy in. Because a big change, a big overnight thing, we're going to turn the system off. That's just not realistic, right? You drive buy-in by proof and adoption and getting people comfortable with the system. And like you kind of said a couple times here, getting people to buy in and see that it's a benefit for them, right? It's making their lives better. Why not use it? And then we can tack on more things as we get more comfortable with things. There's a lot of good points there.
Yeah, I mean, control automation is a pretty slow moving industry. It is a marathon. You're not going to overnight replace everything. It's going to take years because, like you said, these legacy equipment, they may be around for 20 or 30 years. So you have time and take it at what makes sense for the customer.
It's a good checkpoint, I think, for customers too, right? It's understanding that, yeah, we can make progress, but it needs to be iterative progress. We need to make sure we're not disrupting things. We have to remember that production at the end of the day is priority one. We need to keep running, but we can slowly and continually improve it. We can roadmap things. We can plan for when integration is going to come into things. We can slowly and also quickly adopt our legacy systems with a proper and strong roadmap. The challenge I think that's kind of coming into the industry too now is that with all this change, and like we've said, it's kind of a slow changing industry. There's probably a skills gap that's kind of growing or evolving with all this new technology. Are you guys kind of finding that too? Are you making plans around how to address that?
Yeah, Inductive definitely can see that. And one of the main things that the company does is just try to publish as many resources as possible. Things like our user manual, things like the forms, things like the exchange, Inductive University, of course, the training classes and whatnot. We really try to publish as much information as possible because, like any integration system, the more information, the better kind of decisions you can make. When it comes to personally, of course, as a sales engineer, I try to give as much information to the customer as I can, just from previous experience or talking to other customers. And then when I was an integrator, it was always just better user interface, better user experience, more streamlined design, less clickety click, more, not as many colors and flashing. I'm a big fan of the older style, very muted visuals. And so things like that to really kind of make it almost more intuitive than something you have to learn is probably the direction that I would head down at the plant level, at least.
It's a good point, right? Like you want the design to be that someone can, just from looking at it, be drawn to it and understand this is the flow of the operation. This is where I need to bring my eyes to, right? You made a good point about, highly performing HMIs. It's been designed that way because we want to draw operators' attentions to what's important to them, right? We want to understand what is an alarm, what is something that needs to be dealt with right now, what is more just general process information, right? We don't want to take away or overwhelm an operator or give them too many flashing things because then we've lost the plot effectively, right? And to your point, Inductive's done a great job with a lot of the IA content that comes out. The IA University has been amazing. It's how I got into Ignition. It's how I evolved from just controls into more SCADA, into MES, and kind of kicked off my career in kind of more in this evolved space. And I think you guys are also doing a great job, especially with 8.3, where you're introducing the connectors, having Kafka connectors, and having the data silo or data pipeline publishing, if I could call it that, right? Where now we're getting more into the plans around integrations to AI and other data streams, right? And I think it's really opening a lot of controls engineers' eyes to all the other levels that data can be used, right? And sometimes as controls engineers, we can get too mired in the plant floor and forget the whole upper echelon of systems. So it's really quite interesting, right? And I think it also goes to show to you how IA really involves the community, right? The forum's always been a great resource. There's lots of great discussion on those. The whole ICC conference is always, a calendar mark in the event, right? Go there, you hear from industry peers, you get to connect with other customers, right? And you connect with other vendors, right? We talk with all the other IA vendors. It's quite interesting how you guys have really built this community. From this community, do you find that you hear from customers saying, "Oh, I saw on the forum, or I got an info request, and I saw other integrators talking about this"? Do you find it kind of comes organically, commonly?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of people in the industry just enjoy sharing information and making systems as efficient as possible. They enjoy helping each other out. Of course, it is business, so some of that gets saved for specific integrators, but when it's not something that is, particularly monetizable, they're more than happy to share that information amongst themselves. And honestly, a lot of the times, even when it is monetizable, they'll just share it anyway because they like you with that. We love hosting these panels. We love the ICC. We love all the content and the interaction between everybody because it really is a community. It's not a bunch of individual companies. These people have, they've been friends forever. We have so many integrators that have just known each other because they work in the same space. They attend the same events. ICC is not the only one. These people see each other throughout the year at different trade shows and conferences, and it's really a community, for literally lack of a better word. It is, everybody is friends, everybody enjoys each other, and information flows freely because it helps everybody.
I think that's a pretty unique thing that a lot of other industries don't really appreciate, or it's a little bit maybe more competitive, or like you said, there are certain things that you're just not going to share, just part of the business. But it is also very forthcoming of, what the best practice is. This is the open source standards that I'm using, and everyone kind of unifies around that and rallies around that. It really is nice to be a part of in a lot of ways, right? Because even though there are competitors, even though everyone has their own verticals and certain things they can't share, there's still this desire to help one another and to be engaged and to be involved, which kind of leads to an interesting point of, with all these different industries and everything else, is there one that's really kind of surprising you of how much you've helped or how much you've kind of been working with or seen that collaboration go on?
I mean, for me, I have to take it back to my roots in the water or wastewater space. That was kind of my bread and butter for a long time. It's not something that I ever even considered that I'd be working in when I was in high school and college. Of course, I toured the local water plant. I was taught about water in high school and stuff, but it just, to me, never even registered that I would be working at one. And then I get into the integration space. I did some discrete manufacturing. I did some continuous, and things like that. But water was really where I spent a lot of my time. And I feel like I personally helped out my local community. I mean, I worked in a water, for a water facility that covered a couple of counties that were one county over from me. They covered the county that had the college that both my parents went to. And so really getting to see this community that, even though I wasn't necessarily raised in, I was still, tangentially a part of, and being able to help out the individual water operators. I mean, there was even a story that I remember where it was like a Friday at maybe 1 p.m. We get a call, hey, we're having an issue at this wastewater site, a couple counties over. It'll be about an hour and a half drive. Can you guys send anybody out to look? And of course, they sent me. I drive out there. I help the guy out. It's a tiny little plant, one operator, and he's like, thanks so much for fixing this communication issue that we had. That means that I can actually see the data by VPNing in instead of having to come in. And so that saves me from having to make a trip out to the station once each day of the weekend. And so I can spend more time at home, with my kids and family. And for me, that stuff like that really is one of the reasons why I do it, because it makes me feel good to hear that. And I didn't mind, driving a couple hours and maybe getting home a little bit late that night because it saved him the entire weekend, basically. So, yeah.
That's a phenomenal story, right? Like this is what we've kind of been hitting on through the conversation. The work that we're trying to do here is transformative. That's what this industry is for, right? It's what it's about. 10 years ago, even that operator, that solo man show is driving out to that remote plant and tweaking things and adjusting, or he doesn't really even have a notification. It might have even, if he was lucky, like a text SMS for when one of the alarms went off or a pump went or one of the cells or the flow wasn't going, right? And now you've given him the ability to actually like VPN in a whole display there, able to triage and understand if he actually needs to go, if something has happened, alarming. It's quite interesting, right? And I love hearing stories like this. I love hearing stories from suppliers and integrators where they have a certain industry or somewhere they started out that always kind of like rings true to the heart, and I have that one story that kind of again keeps them coming back. Like we had an opportunity to improve this. You had an opportunity to make this connectable and easier for this operator, right? Where it enriches his life. And at the end of the day, work is a core thing, but you gave him more opportunity for time with his family, his friends, right? Like that goes a long way. It really kind of keeps people from burning out, from still being invested in the industry. Like this is great. That's a great story. Thank you. It kind of segues into another good point, or another one I kind of like to talk to our guests about. And that what are some of the most common problems that your customers like to see or want to see resolved is a better way to put it. Is it data connectivity? Is it data silos being resolved? What is it, in your opinion, that customers are really coming to you to say, help me fix this?
I feel like there's kind of two broad categories for customers that are a little bit older, like kind of brownfield sites, things like that. Honestly, it's just getting to 4.0. We talked about the whiteboards. I mean, there are still customers out there that have those. There are still customers that I hear about with Excel, with Access, things like this. And so just getting to 4.0 is still a big problem. It's not going to go away anytime soon. There's plenty of people still to lift up, and it's a slow moving industry, like I said, but also it's an incredibly fast moving industry. And we have things like data centers now where they're greenfield sites that are getting popped up as fast as possible, and they're running into things like scalability issues. They want millions and millions of tags, millions of data points, reports showing information about entire like compounds of facilities, things like that. And so scalability is really the biggest problem that kind of the newer generation is trying to solve. And of course, Inductive is working on improving that where they can, but just eking efficiency out of the programming and the scripting and connections and databases and pruning and all this stuff is really been a big thing in the meantime while we work on longer term solutions.
That's interesting. There's two threads I want to kind of chase with you there that you brought up. I want to start with the brownfield ones. For your customers that are brownfield, we kind of hit on the whiteboard replacements, the Excel spreadsheets. When you get brought in and they have some of these problems, where do you begin? What's your, we'll say, first couple points of advice for these customers that have these brownfields that need to go through the or start this transformation journey?
Really, it's just getting something in there, getting a single ignition instance, and even just pulling in the data and generating a report, or pulling in the data and putting it in a database for something else that they may already have to use. Things like that are really going to be the best start for these brownfield sites because they may not even have a system that is doing that right now. And if they do, seeing how we can work alongside that system instead of doing like a rip and replace, because Ignition has many facets to it. If you're already covered in one area, Ignition can help support the other areas and things like that, so that you can have a somewhat unified system despite being making multiple products at the same time. And I think that kind of calls back to our open standards that we talked about a little earlier.
That is a good callback. I think you kind of touch on it there, the modularity, right? And not just being a rip and replace. Like we'll work alongside you, we'll repurpose things, we will help you get that data and then slowly cut you over almost, right? It's not just again that iterative approach, that not a shock to the system. We'll get something here working alongside you, pull everything in, and then continue to move you forward. And before you know it, you're already in the industry 4.0 ecosphere. And what
Yeah,
seemed insurmountable isn't, right?
and you don't even have to necessarily even cut over. I mean, we're not experts in everything. We know what we're good at, and if there's a software that does it better, we'll let them handle it, and then we'll just work alongside them. It may not be a cutover. We can be a patchwork of a couple of different systems working together to bring the most optimal solution for the user.
I think that's really important to touch on too, right? Because in industry or even outside of industry, everyone feels like it's either one or the other, right? You're either doing this or you're doing something else, right? And I think people take for granted that you can have systems working along one another, right? I think where you guys have really made a great stride or made a lot of strides is because of the open standards, right? You can have interconnectivity. You can live at different levels, right? It's not just, it's our way or the highway. It's we'll work with everybody and we'll find ways to work with everyone. And it really carries things forward for a lot of customers. That's awesome. On the other stream that I kind of want to chase down is for these, say, greenfield sites, for these large data centers, scalability is such a big thing, right? Where it can feel even like what was sufficient for this week is not sufficient a week later, and definitely not sufficient in a year's time. How do you address or how do you plan for these things? How do you work around scalability and building out for these types of scenarios?
It's hard, like you said. Changes happen so rapidly with this new era of innovation. And so I'm not even 100% sure that we're able to necessarily keep up. But thankfully, Ignition's core bedrock of being very horizontally scalable at least allows us to, I guess, we are keeping up, but we're not able to really get ahead yet. And so
Yeah.
we're working very hard internally to try to get ahead, but the goalpost moves and the goalpost moves, and unfortunately, we can't quite keep up, but we've got some plans in mind. And for now, horizontal scaling is working as good as it can. Things like MQTT, trying to bring down the communication, uh, the heaviness of the communication, trying to make it more lightweight the way MQTT does with the pub sub model. Things like that can really help just eke some of that efficiency out and try to keep the number of servers that you need down. But also for a lot of these big data centers, servers aren't the issue, and so they're not too worried on that regard either.
And I think credit where it's due. I'm not sure that anyone can really be, ahead of the game. I think everyone can see the goalposts moving week to week, and it's just a matter of, we talked about it being a marathon at the start, just keeping your stamina up and keeping running, right? Like keep on that treadmill. Don't sprint and burn yourself out. Just keep building towards things. Keep understanding that the goalposts are going to move and keep building toward that new goalpost. So it's a good perspective. It's a very humble perspective because I think you guys do a very great job of that too, right? You can see it with everything we do with how we build our ignition systems.
Yeah, and the product even itself, we're really trying to move in that direction. We announced at the most recent ICC that we are moving to a new release cadence that's going to be with Ignition 2027-02. And there's a whole blog post up on our website where you can read more about the specifics of that. But it is really going to help keep up more quickly rather than having these larger releases over time where maybe the feature that we were trying to get is kind of almost in the past at this point because some of these industries are moving so fast they want a feature in 6 months or a year, and our previous timeline was a little longer than that. And so hopefully now with this new release cadence we're going to be able to really keep pace better and maybe even try to match stride or hopefully get ahead.
Again, that shows to your future planning, right? And tracking where the goalposts are going. It's keeping you in a way ahead of the curve, right? Where maybe not the development is there, but the thought process there. And I think
Yes,
having the thought process goes a long way. Now
exactly.
it's funny, right? We're already on this kind of mindset of the goalposts are moving, the industry is continuously transforming, it's always changing, and this is the Industry 4.0 podcast. But where do you think the Industry 5.0 will be? Do you think it's here now? Do you think it's coming? I know it's a loaded question, and I think I have an idea of the answer, but I want to hear it. I want to hear what you think of it.
Originally, mm, I- my first thought is we're still a little far away from it just because, again, we're still trying to get people onto 3.0, but also, for 5.0, I feel like we're closer than we would think as well, especially with these data centers. A lot of the new large setups for data centers, for like solar, for battery storage, things like that, these are really pushing the envelope as much as they can. And a lot of the integrators are looking to make the best possible system because for kind of the first time in a long time, resources aren't necessarily constrained as much as they used to be. I mean, working in the water industry, getting any upgrade was almost impossible versus data centers are like, okay, I'll buy another couple more servers. It's not a drop in the bucket. And so I really think I heard a quote the other day. It was something like, welcome to the next generation of systems integrators. Everybody is DevOps now. And I think that might be kind of my wake up call for 5.0. We're really moving towards the automation of automation and getting these systems set up and able to pop up quickly to be able to keep pace with the rapid development of a lot of these big industries right now.
That is a fantastic point because it feels like now many customers are asking what the CI/CD pipeline is. They're asking what the dev QA production pipeline is. What's the commits like? How do you revert? How do you handle rainy day scenarios, right? It's a very interesting point because it feels like IT and OT are blending more than ever in a lot of ways. And also we are adopting, say, traditional computer science background and practices and processes, right? With all due respect to the industry, and I love the controls industry, it is a bit of a cowboy industry for many years, right? And now we are kind of introducing proper structures, proper control, utilizing things like Git and other resource controls, repos, right? Um, no longer back to my early days of setting a PLC program with the latest date that I didn't upload from, right? We're introducing, a proper resource and fab refactorings and other such things. That's a very good point. Thank you. And then on the flip side of it, my previous guest wanted to ask me, and I'll kind of push it here. What's an Industry 4.0 question that you would like answered? And I'm going to ask my next guest the same thing.
I think I want to kind of take it back in time a little bit. I shared one of my favorite stories, so I want to hear what their favorite story of moving from 3.0 to 4.0 is. What's their favorite upgrade path that they ever had?
That's great. I can't wait to ask that because, again, similarly, I loved hearing the water story. I loved hearing how it improved for that operator and how it touched so many people's. And I also felt like it's kind of a launching point of your own career into the controls and manufacturing and not even just that, but like the wastewater world, right? And kind of what keeps you coming back. It's a core story that you can kind of see has affected your career, kind of going moving forward. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Kind of coming to the end of our podcast here, and I like to do this with every guest. But there's anything you want to talk about from your side of the world, from what inductive automation is doing, anything you guys are looking forward to coming into the 2026 year?
Honestly, I think I've covered most of the topics. Mostly just we've got 8.3 out now. We're working on, the future versions. We're really excited for all that. 8.3's got lots of cool features that everybody can use that I know the industry has been excited for a long time. Things like the native drawing tools, things like the event streams you mentioned earlier. So, really just more of that community aspect where you're pulling in, looking at the new features. We've got new Inductive University courses going up all the time. The docs are always getting updated. And just so more of this community fostering is all that I would like to promote.
I think with the latest tools you guys are putting out in 8.3, the DevOps nature of focus, I'm very curious and want to keep playing with that a little bit more. Even the event streams, I think you're going to see this community grow and grow and grow. I think you guys continue to open the doors for more people to get involved with it, for more people to want to use the software. There's a lot of things I'm excited to see, and I think you guys are excited too. So it's going to be fun to see what the industry does next with it. Our forum is one of my fun morning reads, like a newspaper for myself. So I do want to thank you again, Chase, for joining. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've gotten to hear your opinions on where the industry is going, your own experiences with the industry, what you guys are doing with Inductive, and what you yourself are doing with the industry as a whole. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I'd love to hear from you guys. You could follow Grantek on LinkedIn, stay up to date with what we're doing, what I'm posting about, what I'm talking about. If you could subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast, where we get your podcast. And or if you have any questions, you want to talk to Grantek or Chase or myself, you can start with info@grantek.com. And we look forward to having you join us on the next Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Thanks, everyone.